The look on my son David's face when my lawyer, Elias, reached page 4 of the trust agreement, I'd pay the whole $1.4 million just to see it again. 25 years of being a father, 10 years of being a widower, and 5 years of being the old man who needs help. And in one single sentence, David's entire world collapsed. He looked at me, then at the document, then back at me, his mouth hanging open like a landed trout. He never once considered that I might have a plan of my own. He thought he was playing chess with a man who couldn't see the board. But to understand why he and his sister have no one to blame but themselves, I need to take you back to the beginning. I'm 72 years old. I spent 40 of those years running a mid-sized construction firm in Northern Virginia. I didn't get rich quick. I got rich slowly, one brick and one contract at a time. I built the house I live in with my own 2 hands back in 1988, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths on 6 acres of prime land. I put David through an expensive business school and paid for my daughter Sarah's master's degree in art history. When my wife Martha passed away 8 years ago, she left me with a broken heart but a very comfortable nest egg. Between the house, my investments, and the business I sold off, I'm sitting on about $1.4 million. To my kids, however, I wasn't a man who had worked himself to the bone to provide for them. I was a ticking clock. I was an ATM that was starting to get a little dusty. The first crack in the foundation appeared about 18 months ago. It started small. David's wife, Jessica, a woman who has never worked a day in her life but talks like she's a Fortune 500 CEO, started making comments about the stairs in my house. "Arthur, don't those knees hurt? A bungalow would be so much easier for you." Then it was Sarah's husband, Mark, a man who thinks hard work is choosing a font for a PowerPoint presentation, mentioning how demanding the yard work must be. I told them I liked the stairs. I told them the yard work kept me young. I thought it was just misplaced concern. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that they were just worried about their old man. But then came the Sunday dinner last October, and I realized the concern wasn't for my health, it was for the equity. I was in the kitchen getting the roast out of the oven when I heard them in the dining room. They didn't think I could hear them. To them, I'm half deaf as well as half senile. "If we get him into the Gables by January, we can list the house in the spring market," David was saying. His voice was low, clinical. "The market is peaking. If we wait another 2 years, we might lose $200,000 in value." "And the maintenance costs are eating into the principal," Sarah added. I could hear the clinking of her wine glass. "He spent $6,000 last month on a new roof. That's our money he's spending on a house he won't even be in for much longer." Our money. That phrase hit me harder than a falling beam. I stood there holding a hot roasting pan, feeling the heat seep through the oven mitts, and I realized they didn't see me as their father. They saw me as a bank account with a pulse. They were already dividing the spoils while I was still standing in the kitchen cooking their dinner. If that was all, I probably would have sat them down and had a stern talk, but then came the brochures. A week later, Jessica dropped by with a glossy folder. "The Gables Luxury Senior Living," it said in gold embossed letters. It looked like a hotel, but the kind where they tuck you in and wait for you to stop breathing. She talked about the social calendar and the on-site medical staff as if she were selling me a vacation. I told her I wasn't interested. I told her I wanted to die in the house I built. The look she gave me wasn't one of sympathy. It was one of annoyance, like I was a toddler refusing to put on my shoes. The disrespect escalated quickly after that. They started treating me like a guest in my own home. David actually brought a real estate agent by one afternoon while I was out getting groceries. I came home to find a stranger measuring my living room windows. When I asked what the hell was going on, David had the audacity to say, "We're just getting an appraisal for insurance purposes, Dad. Don't worry your head about it." He lied to my face in the house I paid for. Something in me shifted that day. I didn't yell. I didn't throw them out. I've always been a man who measures twice and cuts once. If they wanted to play a game of leverage, I'd show them how a real builder handles a structural weakness. I didn't say a word. But the next morning, I made a call to Elias Thorne. Elias has been my attorney and my friend for 30 years. He's the kind of guy who hides a shark's heart behind a grandfatherly smile. I spent the next 2 months getting everything in order. They had no idea what was coming. None of them did. They were too busy picked out paint colors for the renovations they planned to do before selling my house. The intervention happened 2 weeks ago. They all showed up. David, Jessica, Sarah, and Mark. They didn't even bring the grandkids. This was a business meeting. They sat me down in my favorite leather armchair, the one Martha bought me for my 60th, and circled around me like vultures. "Dad," David began, his voice dripping with that fake practiced empathy. "We've been talking. We're really worried about your safety here. The incident with the stove last week was the final straw." I blinked. "What incident with the stove, David?" "The burner you left on," Sarah said, leaning forward. "Mark saw it when we stopped by. It's a fire hazard, Dad. You're becoming a danger to yourself." Mark hadn't been by the house in a month. I knew they were lying. They were building a case for incompetency. They had even brought papers, a voluntary power of attorney and a residency agreement for the Gables. They wanted me to sign away my life so they could start liquidating the $1.4 million. "I've already put down the deposit for you," David said, sliding a pen across the coffee table. "It's a luxury suite. You'll love it. And don't worry about the house. We'll take care of everything. We've set up a family trust to manage the assets so you don't have to stress." I looked at the pen. Then I looked at David. "And the trust," I said quietly. "Who are the trustees?" "Sarah and I," David said. "It's for the best." I leaned back and nodded slowly. "I see. And what if I don't want to go?" The mask slipped then. Jessica sighed loudly. "Arthur, don't be difficult. We've already talked to a specialist. If we have to go to court to prove you can't manage your own affairs, we will. We don't want it to be ugly, but we will protect you from yourself." It was a threat, plain and simple. Sign the papers and go quietly, or we'll drag you through the mud and take it anyway. I took a deep breath. "You're right," I said. "We should make sure the trust is handled correctly. In fact, I invited Elias over to help us finalize the details. He should be here any minute." David smirked. He thought Elias was just there to witness my surrender. Great, the sooner the better. Elias arrived 5 minutes later, carrying a thick leather briefcase. He didn't smile at them. He just sat down, pulled out a stack of documents, and adjusted his glasses. Elias said to David and Sarah, his voice as dry as parchment, "Your father asked me to review the family trust you've been so concerned about. However, as your father's primary counsel, I reminded him that the $1.4 million and this property were placed into a revocable living trust 5 years ago, a trust that I drafted." "Right," David said, waving a hand dismissively. "And we're the beneficiaries. We just need to move the management over to us now that Dad is transitioning."
"Not exactly," Elias said. He flipped to page 4. "You see, your father added an amendment 6 weeks ago. It's a very specific provision we call the Occupancy and Autonomy Clause." The room went quiet. I watched Sarah's grip tighten on her designer handbag. "The clause states," Elias continued, reading slowly, "that the primary purpose of the trust's liquidity, the $1.4 million, is to ensure the grantor's, that's your father, right to reside in his primary residence for as long as he desires. It further states that any attempt by the secondary beneficiaries, that's you two, to forcibly remove the grantor from his home or to file for legal guardianship against his will for the purpose of asset liquidation constitutes a hostile breach of intent." David's smirk was gone. "A breach? What does that mean?" "It means," I said, speaking for the first time, my voice calm and steady, "that you just tripped the wire, David." Elias cleared his throat. "According to the clause, if a hostile breach is attempted, which, as of this meeting and the recorded threats of legal action Jessica made 10 minutes ago, has occurred, the secondary beneficiaries are immediately and irrevocably disqualified from the trust. The funds are then diverted into a private annuity for your father's 24-hour in-home care, and the remainder, upon his passing, will be donated to the Habitat for Humanity Trade School Scholarship Fund." The silence in the room was so thick you could have cut it with a bucksaw. Sarah's face went from pale to a ghostly white. Mark started to say something, but no sound came out. "Wait," David stammered, his voice jumping an octave. "You're saying, because we tried to put you in a home, we're out? All of it? The whole $1 million? "Actually," Elias said, looking at his watch, "since you've already signed the intent to liquidate documents you brought today, you've confirmed the breach. The trust funds for your personal use have already been frozen. The monthly stipends you two have been receiving for your consulting roles in your father's remaining holdings, those stopped as of 9 a.m. this morning." David lunged for the papers on the table, but Elias was faster. He pulled them back into his briefcase. "You can't do this," Sarah shrieked, standing up. "We're your children. We were just trying to help."
You were trying to sell my house while I was still breathing in it, Sarah, I said, standing up to face her. I felt taller than I had in years. You were worried about the roof cost eating into your money. Well, now it's not your money. It's the scholarship fund's money, and they'll be happy to know that I'm putting a brand new deck on the back of this house next month. I might even put in a pool. It's amazing how much work you can get done when you're not worried about leaving a principal for people who can't wait for you to die. Mark stood up, his face red. This is senile. We'll fight this in court. You can't just cut your own kids out because of a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, Mark, I said. I have the recording. This room is equipped with a security system I installed myself last month. I have David and Jessica on video threatening to declare me incompetent if it didn't sign over the house. In this state, that's called elder abuse and coercion. If you want to go to court, we can start with that. That was the moment, the emotional climax I'd been waiting for. I saw the realization hit David like a physical blow. He looked at the house he had already appraised, the house he had already sold in his head, and he realized he'd never own a single brick of it. He'd spent years acting entitled to a fortune he hadn't earned, and in his greed he'd managed to delete his own future. Out, I said quietly. Dad, please, David started, his voice cracking. I have the mortgage on the condo and Jessica's car lease.
I suggest you find a way to pay for them, I said. Maybe you can get a job that doesn't involve consulting for your father. Elias, would you show them the door? I have a roast in the oven, and I'd like to eat it in peace. The aftermath was surprisingly quiet. They tried to call, of course. Sarah sent a long, rambling email about family values and how she'd always loved me. I didn't reply. David tried to come by a week later, but I'd already changed the locks and hired a private security firm to patrol the perimeter. It's amazing what you can afford when you're not subsidizing 4 ungrateful adults. The most satisfying part isn't the money, though. It's the peace. I sit on my porch every evening now, in the house I built, watching the sun set over my 6 acres. I'm not a ticking clock anymore. I'm just a man living in his home. My son calls every Sunday now. He doesn't mention the gables anymore. He doesn't mention the stairs. He mostly just asks if I'm feeling well and tells me how hard he's working at the new firm he had to join. It's funny how a man's health becomes so much more important to his children once they realize their inheritance depends on his good mood rather than his demise. I haven't changed the trust back. I don't think I will. The Trade School Scholarship Fund is going to help a lot of kids who actually want to work for a living. And as for me, I think I'll stay right here. After all, the Occupancy Clause is very clear. This is my home, and I'm not going anywhere.